Okay, welcome along. Today I'm chatting with Ruth Tarrant, one of our newest Hub experts, all about loss of bone density. Ruth, do you want to tell us a bit about what you do, who you are, and then we'll get started?
Yeah, I've got quite an interesting backstory to my kind of peri journey and how I've ended up becoming um, quite quite well informed really on things to do with weight training, resistance training, that kind of thing. People often say to me, what do you do? And I always really want to say things like, oh, I'm a teacher. But actually that's the really boring part of my life. Um, I also am a kettlebell expert. So I compete for kettlebell sport for the England team, and have done for just over a year. Um, but I haven't always been into my weight training at all. Oh no. In my 20s, I did a lot of rowing, and general kind of pootling along to the gym, generally quite happy with bits of anything, that kind of age where you feel you can take anything on, have a go at anything, and for many people, it's great. Fast forward a few years to early to mid 30s, and I broke my right foot. Exactly a year later to the day, identical break in my left foot, same bone, opposite side, like a mirror image x-ray. It didn't heal, and it turned out mid 30s I actually was in the start of osteoporosis, which we call osteopenia, which is where your bones start to lose density, but it's not really a particularly dangerous point. But those two fractures in quick succession were genuinely a real wake-up call, because I'd seen my great granny in a nursing home in her 90s with a hip fracture and thought, well, I've got 60 years, and I didn't. And actually, in retrospect, as with all things peri, it's easy to put the pieces into place in retrospect. Actually, I'd started peri quite early, relatively speaking, and actually those bone fractures were an initial sign. That said, it didn't, none of the doctors at the hospital put two and two together. It was simply a chance encounter with a locum doctor when I went to pick up some other blood tests, who said, your vitamin D is really low. And actually, we tested all kinds of other things as well. And there's definitely something not quite right here. Let's talk about perimenopause. And I just thought, what? I'm 36. And she said, well, there's lots you can do to help yourself feel better. I'm not going to promise that every day will be a bed of roses. It isn't. But actually, I had to do so much rehab to strengthen my bones. I had to learn to walk again. And I just happened to find myself totally by accident, because I'm also really dippy, in the wrong class at my gym. I'd signed up for a nice, or so I thought, stretch and tone session. It was a kettlebell class. And then I was too embarrassed. To say I'm in the wrong place because I felt like such an idiot. So I stayed there at the back, in my slightly ill-fitting gym clothes that were not appropriate in any way, shape or form for weightlifting. Got through the class and thought, you know what, I feel really good on this. And I stuck with it for a few weeks and just saw so many improvements in terms of how easy it was to walk again. And then started piecing together more and more things. Qualified as a British weightlifting instructor. I run a local community class. We have people from all sections of the community coming. A lot of women in perimenopause and menopause, as well as lots of local adults with additional learning needs as well, who often really struggle, a bit like people, women in peri, with weight training. And from there, in lockdown, it's just grown, so I can reach more people through Zoom classes. And actually, as the conversations have started, it's almost been easier talking to my kettlebell community about things like peri, and other issues that women face going to the gym. It's not just that. Some of us really hate the way we look in gym clothes, don't we? It's all of these conversations that are important. And actually, I almost think technology and the way we've been able to connect over the last few months has really helped people to connect the dots.
Yeah.
So that's me, and here I am.
Awesome. So obviously you've got first-hand experience of osteopenia, and then making changes with weight training. And obviously we at large, I say we, me as a personal trainer, people who work in the perimenopause world generally, we're all always telling women that it's a good idea to weight train, and that this will help their bone density and help. And it's brilliant to hear it firsthand, how it has
Yeah.
actually helped you, rather than it being this kind of, yeah, it'll help. You know, like eating carrots is good for you. It'll do you some good. Do you know what I mean? So I know you've got lots of facts and figures to your hand, to at your fingertips right now. So do you want to tell us a few of the facts and figures about it, and then we'll get back to how it's helped you and specific suggestions.
Absolutely. I'm going to apologise in front, as well as being into exercise and things like that. I'm a little bit of a numbers geek as well. So you can, you know, I'm going to geek out a little bit here with some of my numbers. So, you know, so just I'll start with some of the things that actually really hit home to me, that I think they actually sound quite shocking, but I actually don't want people to be shocked listening to this, because what I do want to talk about later is how we can do something about it. And that is that 20% of women over the age of 50 have osteoporosis. They might not know it. They might not know it, but they do. 20%. And I think that's astonishing. 1 woman in 5. It gets worse, Emily. I'm sorry. 50% of women over 50 have osteopenia, but they don't know it until there's actually a fracture or something like that. So to me, those numbers they're a real wake-up call. And actually, why aren't we talking about this more? Because this is really, really, really important. 1 in 2 women over the age of 50 will break a bone at some point due to having brittle bones. 50% of us will break a bone. And part of the problem with that, in a sense, I was kind of lucky breaking bones in my mid-30s, because I still felt just about active enough to be able to think, you know what, I'm going to be able to rebuild this and get back to something resembling a vague bit of normality. But I think the older we get, it can seem more and more daunting to actually, you know, get into exercise and do those things. You know, if it's something you're not used to doing, it's really hard to think, you know what, I'm going to be that person, and you know, I am not scared of the dumbbells in the gym anymore. It's not an easy thing to do at all. So those are my kind of first set of statistics. The next set, which I've got from some really helpful ladies working in the sports science departments at Loughborough University. What they've done, there's some studies that have been done quite recently, mostly in places like Canada, Sweden, Finland, places that I think are generally, that there's maybe a bit more gender equality in things like healthcare. So that just means that more money gets directed into looking at those kinds of things. It's sad that that's what it comes down to, but that's what directs medical research.
Yeah.
And what they've discovered is that we can split, that what they've roughly split the kind of the perimenopause bracket of ladies into 2. One they're calling early perimenopause, and for them, because they're scientists, they've got to be able to classify things in certain ways to make the studies work. It's anyone whose periods are still, it's not that they're frequent, but you know, it's not more than 3 months between periods. So you can be irregular, but as long as it's roughly once every 3 months or somewhere in that ballpark, you're counted as early. And anything more than that, they count as late. Now, the good news for ladies in early perimenopause is that actually the rate at which your bones get thinner is no different to the rate that men's bones get thinner at the same age. So that's kind of good news. The bad news, that I'm sorry to follow the good news by slightly worse news, is that in late perimenopause, so particularly the 2 years before you actually hit menopause, although actually, you know, that's really hard to work out, isn't it, on the ground? How do you know if you've got 2 years to go? But anyway, that aside, the 2 years before, your bone loss, you lose bone density at about 2% a year. And then for about the 2 years immediately after menopause, it's then between 3 and 5% a year. And then it all kind of settles down. So, but what we have is this moment that men don't have. Men's bones decrease in strength as well. You know, we're not special in that regard, but what is special about us is this sudden whammy of bone density loss. And there's a whole host of factors for that, but one of the big factors is actually estrogen. Estrogen is a great tool for maintaining bone density, and as soon as your estrogen kind of goes out the window, it has an enormous impact on your bone density. So you've got that window of about 5 years, 2 years at the end of peri, 2 to 3 years at the start of menopause, where it's really terrible in terms of how much of your bones that you can lose 20% of your overall bone density in that time, which is quite a lot, really. You know, imagine a sort of Christmas tree, you know, and hollowing out the trunk. You know, it's still going to stand up, you know, but it's not that disastrous. We haven't, you know, completely lopped the bottom or all the branches off, but actually we've lost a lot of that kind of inner kind of core strength, really. So you know, what can we do about it? Well, there's two things. Sorry, I've got a slightly ghoulish light bulb that keeps turning itself on and off. I'm really sorry. So there's two things that spring to mind in terms of exercise. The two aspects to keeping your bone density quite healthy. That's the strange light. 1 second. I'm just going to turn it off. It's much easier. You know, one thing is the kind of what we call, like, what people generally regard as exercise, the kind of cardiovascular, getting a bit of a sweat on. And ideally, we need to be doing about 2.5 hours a week. Now, I'm not talking about suddenly running for 2.5 hours in one go. And you know this as well as anybody. A brisk walk is really good. If you're able to go for a run, if actually what you want to do is just climb up and down the steps at home, you know, if you're having a pajama day, go for your steps at home.
It can be dancing around your favourite songs. There's nothing.
Dance, aerobics, all of that, absolutely brilliant. But the key is weight bearing. So whilst you might love to go for a swim, whilst you might love to be out on a bike, those are good for you, but they'll build less bone strength back than something where you're actually got your feet on the ground and taking a little bit of weight. But the bit that most people miss in all of this, that actually women in particular, although everybody really, should be doing weights or resistance work probably twice a week, 3 times if you can. And the reason for that is that when you lift weights, what happens is the tendons that kind of attach onto the bone, so tendons attach muscle to bone. People often get it confused with ligaments, which attach bones to bones. But tendons, when they pull on your bone, that they're, by pulling on the bone to make your muscles move, or the other way around, that pulling on the bone also adds bone strength as well. So, you know, we need to do both. And again, you know, I'm not advocating that you suddenly go out, join a gym, start lifting weights in the corner, and then collapse in a heap. There is absolutely loads you can do. Body weight stuff is great. You know, if you've got a chair and a table at home, stuff you can lean on to do, you know, even like standing press ups, you know, something like that would be. But carrying your grocery shopping home from Tesco's is great. Resistance bands, which you can buy, you know, Amazon, most sports retailers, you can buy a packet of resistance bands for about £5. So I think people can get really intimidated by the idea of weight training and resistance training. You don't have to be a beefcake in your gym deadlifting 150 kilos. If you can, brilliant. If you can't, you know what, get your bean tins out and give it a go. The more you do, the better. The NHS has finally cottoned on to that. So lots of people know about the Couch to 5K kind of running program. They actually also have tagged onto that something called the Strength and Flex program. Again, it's 5 podcasts, it's completely free. You download them, so it talks you through it. And it uses nothing more exciting than your kitchen chair or a dining table chair or your sofa. So, you know, these things, they do make a difference. There was a brilliant analogy, which I think I mentioned to you last week. I was chatting to a friend about it, and she'd read this somewhere, that your bone density strength is a bit like having a bank account. So for women, up until the age of about 30, these are averages, you know, until the age of about 30, we are constantly adding to our bank of bone density. Unless, for example, women who've suffered with eating disorders, things like anorexia or bulimia, can find it a lot harder to build bone mass. People whose body mass index is quite low can just generally, even if there's no eating disorder present, can find it quite hard. If you've had treatment for breast cancer, that affects your bone density as well. And if you've taken any kind of steroidal medicine, getting rid of those particular people, just for now, for the statistics, the average woman will build bone until the age of about 30 with very little effort at all. If you're vaguely active, that will, you know, your bone density will build. And then it starts to decline. We don't replace it as quickly as we get through it. But the more you build up what's in that bank account up to the age of 30, the more you've got in reserve. Now, for most of us who've hit peri, that bit's a little bit too late. We can't build it anymore. But what we can do is stop it from falling off quite as dramatically. So that's the bit we're at. So, you know, ladies, if you have teenage daughters or daughters in their 20s, one of the best things you can do is encourage them to do some exercise, because they don't want to be breaking bones. You know, so it you know, getting the conversation going is really important here.
I'm suddenly feeling quite smug actually right now. I hadn't realised that 30 was the sort of the magic number there, but I did ski seasons until I was about 33, I think. So there I was, like, skiing all the time and walking all the time. Who knew?
Yeah.
I was super building, and then came back
Absolutely.
and started doing triathlons, and so I was running all the time and therefore super building. Quite smug.
Yeah, brilliant. You know what you need? You need a blue Peter badge for that, don't you? But no, it's really important. Really important.
Yeah. So just quickly going back to what people can do at home. So obviously, anything that you can lift is a weight. Your body weight is a weight.
Absolutely.
Resistance bands, all of those things. Are there any particular exercises that you would encourage people to definitely include?
Yeah, there are a few. Obviously, I'm slightly kettlebell biased, with that being my technical background. And there's a set of exercises that I think are really useful. If you've got a kettlebell or not, it probably doesn't matter hugely. Trying to find the time and the energy, to be honest, to do your kind of cardio stuff for the 2.5 hours plus your 2 or 3 weight sessions a week can be quite a challenge. You know, I'm particularly, for me, I'm working, kids in and out of the house all the time. Some days where I just feel like death and just want my duvet. So for me, that's where my kettlebells come in, because it's actually both in one go, because I'm standing up and I'm moving around. My heart rate's really high. So things like a kettlebell swing, if you've got access to kettlebells, you know, so, you know, 2 hands on your kettlebell, you're just using your entire, so the back of your body, what we call the posterior chain, which is the technical way of saying all the bits around the back. And the reason for something like a kettlebell swing, and there are lots of great videos online that just show you how to do that. It's very difficult to give yourself an injury doing this particular move, which is also why I've recommended it. But one of the other reasons for doing it is that one of the greatest areas of bone loss for women is around the hips and the pelvis. So anything we can do that helps to, you know, take your weight through your feet, but also using that bit of your body is really, really effective. If you haven't got a kettlebell, you can copy the move using, you know, a children's football. It doesn't have to be anything particularly heavy. You know, bag of pasta, bag of rice, particularly the ones with the handles on the top. Every supermarket's selling bulk bags of rice and pasta still. So that's one exercise. And then another great one is to do with the traditional way of calling it is like a farmer's carry, but actually wanting a weight in each hand. This can be your shopping bags and going up and down your stairs as well. You know, the more times you do it, your heart rate will go up, but you're also holding things. At the bottom, you could do some little squats or something like that. But you know, and the best ones really are the moves that where you're going to use your whole body. You don't need to be one of the people in the gym just doing bicep curls with a dumbbell in front of the mirror. It might make your biceps look big. It will do very little to improve your bone health, or even your flexibility. You know, if those sorts of moves sound too simple for people, you know, if you've been doing that kind of thing for a little while, it's not, you know, what I would call compound lifts. So if you have access to something like a barbell, or, you know, even a broomstick handle with some things hanging off the end, that's what I've used sometimes in lockdown. Feel like an idiot, but I don't care. I've got my bags of pasta hanging off the end of a $2.99 broomstick handle from Tool Station. My neighbours think I'm insane, Emily. Honestly, I do this on the driveway. You know, a simple deadlift moves with that, because again, you're using your hips, you're using your back, and you're having to engage so many muscles to do that. If it's not too heavy, you can introduce like a little jump with it as well. And again, you know, that's also great because it helps with flexibility. One of the things that happens as we get older, particularly in peri, is that our muscle fibers start to shrink. And as they start to shrink, they just tighten up a little bit. And that's one of the reasons why people get a bit stiffer. It's not just the joints that seize up. Actually, our muscles just aren't quite as stretchy as they used to be. So, you know, any of those sorts of moves are great. You know, with the weight in each hand as well. Simple lunge moves, so just stepping forward, going down as low as you can. You can even hold onto a chair with one arm if your balance is a bit ropey. But you know, there are some fantastic free programs. I've mentioned the NHS Strength and Flex program. The Royal Osteoporosis Society also has a whole series of free videos on there that with really easy to learn moves, very, very clear instruction. As someone who teaches exercise, I'm quite impressed with the quality of it, although the people they've got doing the exercises do look quite old. So if you're watching it, you will feel quite young. But the exercises are great, and you can make them more advanced by holding a weight of some description in one arm or the other. You know, but if you want to be more adventurous, then, you know, I can't emphasize enough, if you're lifting something heavier, it's definitely worth getting in touch with a professional, even just for 1 or 2 sessions, just to learn some correct technique. It can be face to face if you've got access to that. It can be, you know, everyone's learned how to do Zoom recently. There's some fantastic people doing some, you know, really good work on platforms like Zoom. So, you know, you don't want to give yourself more injuries by overtraining or doing it incorrectly. So if you want to try something more advanced, I would definitely recommend getting some professional help, but don't feel like you have to take out a full gym membership. There's lots of ways around this.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And personal trainer me is 100% agreeing with you that you know, all the exercises that we see online and stuff, I always feel like I need to give a little sort of caveat that actually it can be worth just watching yourself do them in a mirror, so that you can check that you are doing the same as they're doing on the video. Because certainly with things like squats and lunges, I have witnessed people quite often and their knees are just not holding them as they should be or something. And obviously we really don't want to be encouraging knee injuries right now.
No.
But that's just me being massively careful about people.
No, you're absolutely right. A window. I've got a patio door leads out onto my patio, and I put a sheet over the back of it, which kind of turns it into a mirror, and it also stops my nosy children inside from watching me train. Or even just setting up, actually videoing yourself. No one else has to see it, so don't worry about whether you're in your pants or leggings that have got a hole in an inconvenient place. I've got plenty of those. It's worth giving it a go. And the stronger your bones are and the stronger your muscles are, so those two working together, actually there's quite a lot of emerging evidence in exercise science that suggests it helps to reduce fatigue as well. So if your body can take a little bit more of the strain during the day, you're likely to become less fatigued, which is a real problem for some of us in peri. And I think there are some days where you just think, I'm way too tired to do anything, definitely not exercise. But if you're in one of those days where you're feeling a little bit in between, I'm a bit tired, I really encourage you to get up and just have a go at something for half an hour if you've got the time, because you'll probably find it will give you actually a little bit more energy, and you can think of it as that bank account. You're putting energy money into your bank account and helping your bones in particular, and your muscles. So I think that those stats are just, they were so shocking to me, that for me now, I'll do anything I can to avoid going into overdraft too quickly.
So one thing I was going to say is, obviously when you're feeling maybe that you don't want to get out there and move and do anything, because there can be this kind of feeling, external feeling, that we should, and that it's training or it's exercise, or and certainly for anybody who's come from like a sort of diety background, it can feel very much like it's another of those things that they should be doing, can't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, just like you said, if you can find half an hour, and that, it could be anything. It might be just going out for a walk, it might be jumping around in the garden, it might be playing hopscotch with your kids. It simply doesn't matter. It's just doing something, isn't it? And breaking that cycle of thinking that somehow exercise is some big serious thing, and actually it can be just another sort of fun thing in your day.
No, it really can. There's a brilliant coach that I've worked with. It's actually a Norwegian man who genuinely looks like a Viking. And his approach, one of the things he said to me, because I've had plenty of days where I've said, I can't train today, because for me, because I do compete internationally, there are some days where I genuinely just have to put the big girl pants on and train, but that's part of my job, so that's different to the average person out there. But equally, the coach has said to me, some days it's about just practicing something rather than training. And I really, really like that mindset, that it can be just practice. It can be practicing something, and if it doesn't go well, it doesn't really matter, because tomorrow is another day. And if I've done 5 minutes of something, that's better than no minutes of something. It's easier for someone to do 10 minutes every day. That is so much better than thinking, I've got to do an hour on a Saturday, and then getting to the Saturday and thinking, I'm having a really bad day, and then you've missed your week. So I think that mindset of practice rather than training can be really useful. And then there's another person that I do some work with. It's a movement coach, and the advice that we've called them checkout exercises, because you can do them standing in the checkout at Tesco's or Sainsbury's or other supermarkets of your choice, and you can just the thing. I'm terrible. My husband gets so embarrassed. I find myself bobbing along to things and just like shifting my weight from one foot to another. Little lunges, and in the queue for the bank. But if you suddenly stop to, sometimes there's that, standing for the kids outside the school gate, whatever it might be, there are sometimes moments in your day where you think, I could just do 5 minutes of something. So my classic is calf raises when I'm stirring stuff on the hob in the kitchen. You know, and 5 minutes goes by, so I've got my favourite music on, and you know, it's just a bit like having a bit of a dance while I'm cooking, really. My entire family do think I'm absolutely insane, but like movement is really key.
Yeah,
But we don't have to make it a chore. Often it becomes one of those things that you really enjoy doing and you miss it if you don't get the chance to do it. But it
yeah,
doesn't matter if not you. You know, we're not all absolute nutters that want to compete internationally, and believe me, it takes a lot of time time that I could probably spend doing many other things. But for me, you know, having been through the fractures and really seeing like the dark side of it, having to relearn to walk when you're 36, I can promise you is not fun. And I really want to help other women avoid, you know,
yeah.
not
And that
spotting the
actually,
sign.
that brings me really nicely to what I was about to say, which is one of my favourite memes that I ever see anywhere, which is exercise is a celebration of what you can do, not a punishment for something you ate. And I love that.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
it should always be a celebration of what your body can do. And, you know, whatever limitations you may have, there is always something that you can do and that you can celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And generally, you celebrate, and you know, the endorphins you'll get from it. Hopefully, you'll feel really, you know, it can be a really positive, powerful part of our lives if we let it in.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Ruth.
Thank you, no pleasure.